So as you notice, we've changed settings, and we have some guests here with us, but I'm Denise Lee, and we're at the Fireside chat for the next 30 minutes. So please stay tuned. Dr. Wysocki.
I'm Bryant Wysocki, and allow me to introduce our distinguished guests. We've got Dr. Mike Hayduk. He's the Deputy Director of the Air Force Research Laboratory Information Directorate. And we have Dr. Mark Linderman, the Air Force Senior Science for Command and Control and Decision Support, AFRO. So thank you for joining for our Fireside chat. I think I'll kick things off a little bit. Our partnerships in general are very important to AFRL and how we do business, how we do our research and mature technology. A big part of that is our relationship to academic institutions. And summer faculty and students are a big part of our culture at AFRL and a very important part of the way that we bring advanced technologies and state-of-the-art information back into our directorate and refresh our thinking and complement the research that we conduct in-house. So partnerships with academic institutions, professors, students has been a very big part of my experience at AFRL. And I know it also has been with you, Mike. Do you want to comment a little bit about how this plays in the AFRL mission?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks for the great intro, and congrats to both you and Denise on a great event today. It's been awesome just getting a chance to watch it and to be a small part of it. I'm really excited about seeing the announcements later on in the program as well. Yeah. So as you were saying, our partners in academia, students, faculty, are so critical to us, not only during the summer, but throughout the entire academic year. And, just looking at a few stats in the Information Directorate, we generally bring on close to about 200 summer hires. So that includes both summer students and summer faculty. So you can imagine with a scientific workforce on the order of about 400 scientists and engineers on the government side, you add to that, you're almost, proportionally really increasing what we have going on. And the great part about having those partners is, we're looking across all of our areas at the C4I and cyber. But, specifically the folks come in with the faculty, with the students, and really being able to work on problems of interest to the Air Force. So things we've heard about throughout the last couple of days in terms of trusted AI, absolutely in the swim lane. We're going to hear later on from Karen Roth, Ms. Roth, on the Innovari Advancement Center. So that certainly is bringing this a lot of to fruition in terms of creating the synergy and bringing folks together really in one strategic location as well. So the part I love about the faculty when we bring them in is the fact that working on problems of interest to us now, but the fact that the professors are looking out as well, right? So bringing kind of that seed corn, if you will. We always kind of refer to that for that term mentioned before. And then when the faculty end their time here, it always goes quick. They'll often take the problems back, work on them during the academic year, and really, ultimately, what we hope for is building a longer-term relationship for us. So it's not kind of a one and done. So I always get really excited in the summer, the fact that we see new folks in the hallways.
Exactly.
Non-pandemic days, of course, but you bring them in, and then the students, right? We haven't talked about the students, but I think that's always just awesome. The fact that working with the mentors here, working with, a lot of times tied to a professor as well. New ideas, being able to see them grow and develop, maybe coming in, not so, schooled and as experienced as some of our researchers, but then developing and growing. And the same thing, we see multiple years with a lot of these students. And really, maybe it does turn into a long-term relationship where they end up coming to work for us in the long run. So definitely something we're excited about. Obviously we're into the summer now, but folks who are looking forward to next year, Dr. Stan Wendt leads our summer program. You can certainly contact him. But if you go on our websites and look up things like the Summer Faculty Fellowship Program through AFOSR, our Visiting Faculty Research Program through the Information Directorate, our Summer Internship Program, which is run through the Griffiths Institute, you can get more information about all those programs.
And with respect to the students, it's a big win, of course, if we hire some of those. I mean, that's probably the biggest win directly. But even if that's not the case, we're exposing them to the Air Forces, Space Forces, Department of Defense challenge problems, or even they can start to picture themselves supporting the larger defense ecosystem, whether that's in industry or in the labs or as they continue careers in academia.
It's an excellent point.
I'd like to add as well, I think for me, some of my most rich and rewarding experiences have been with the faculty and students that come to AFRO during the summer. And we've created lifelong friendships and relationships, publishing papers and creating advancements in the technology that have just been a wonderful part of my experience. So from the personal side, I think it's also very, very rewarding to have those relationships and the connections to academia.
And I think also too, when you look at that university, the student, the professors, remember, we have to look at that as like future small businesses, right?
Good point.
We have to look at that as like, they're our future. They're the ones that really, build the opportunities for the end of what it is that we're trying to do, right? They can come up with all of the solutions if possible. They work with us, that personal relationship. I've had multiple opportunities probably in the last 6 months to really work with a lot of students that are very much interested working with us, right? And just to hear what they have to say and how, the mentor, the leadership, respect, just everything in general has been just great.
I think that's a good point. And the other thing I just thought of as we're talking here is having these academic partners. It allows us to pivot pretty quickly in these certain topics, technically, right? If we come up with an idea, very, small, narrow topic area, say specifically within, say, trusted AI, right? We can go out, do a write-up, find some faculty that's interested in it, and probably bring them in for the summer.
To the government, certainly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I just think it's important that we keep that small business aspect as the universities work together to build that, future. And all the teams in general, just in reference to all the engineers, the mentor, the lead, all of that you guys do is just amazing.
And sometimes it's explicit, like an STTR,
Sure.
A specific pairing
Correct.
of small businesses and universities. But, just in terms of the idea space, the opportunity space, bringing in people into the laboratory that can discuss just innovative ideas, maybe at the cutting edge of research, or just novel application areas, we can turn those things around into topics and to other opportunities
Absolutely.
that small business can then jump in on. So
I think certainly this is a great opportunity for us to recognize the important partnerships we have with our academic friends. And so that really brings us to the business side of the house, where there's a synergy between not only the academic institutions, but also the small businesses that team and things like STTRs. But they're also similar because they have the agility and the technical rigor to really pivot quickly. So, for the next portion of our talk, I think we'll focus a little bit about the importance of the small business collective, how that ties into universities, and how really the synergy between those two brings a lot of great technology to the Air Force.
Well, I think, on that, we have to look at what small businesses do for the ecosystem, right? They're out there trying to make sure that we, they in the Air Force meet those needs and requirements. But when you talk about like basic research, that's a huge thing for a lot of these new and upcoming innovative ideas that small businesses have that also intertwine with the universities. So, as you mentioned, both in reference to like how we can advance that lower level, right, to keep going up through our basic, applied, and fielded type things. When you look at all of the economical growth that we can get out of the small businesses and the universities in not only locally, but nationwide, so I think that's a really, big point.
And it is an interesting aspect just on the nationwide portion of that, right? We really do strive, and I think we do a very good job of reaching out to opportunities across the United States and beyond.
Yeah, so just to kind of pile on there, so certainly nationwide with small businesses, what I was going to kind of highlight is kind of the tech ecosystem, right? You kind of think of that as being an important cog in it, right? You have the university piece, small businesses, maybe larger defense contractors, and then feeding the larger defense space. And couldn't agree more. And what I've loved to see, especially in these deep tech areas such as quantum, AI, cyber, we could go on and on. But the fact that, we have so many spin-offs that are coming, and I think there's going to be more and more, and it's been a focus. You might hear some of that from Karen in the Innovare talk about, taking the IP from universities, small businesses, running with it, maybe starting their own businesses. And I think we're going to see more and more of this, especially in an area like AI, as we get into, an area of interest to the Air Force, the trusted AI piece of it. hopefully we'll see those businesses coming about.
You mentioned the ecosystem.
Sure.
And one of the other things that the lab can sometimes provide is that ecosystem that allows small businesses to, create that value add without having to recreate the entire ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So take, for example, maybe what we've done with Ninja, which is a counter
Yes.
UAS program, or the Android Tactical Assault Kit, which is an entire ecosystem that spans the DoD, really in both cases. And a small business doesn't have to create a market out of nothing.
Right.
There's something they can insert their particular contribution into and profit off of that.
Right.
But leveraging the tremendous investments of perhaps dozens of companies that have come before, or academia, or the lab itself. And if you look at those applications, there's tremendous opportunities for AI. And of course, how we choose to use those is now at the nexus of AI and trusted AI, because these are mission critical systems.
Sure.
So that's sort of the role that the lab can play and help facilitate and accelerate the transition.
100%.
Small
I
business
think that's
innovation.
an excellent point, Mark. And I also want to add that, some of the challenges that are associated with deploying, modern AI, big data systems into the government and DoD infrastructure is the proprietary nature of a lot of our legacy and large scale programs. And small businesses and academic institutions allow us to really publish and plug in some very state-of-the-art technologies into an ecosystem that we are building that is really very open in nature. Not so that we restrict maybe the ownership of that IP, but that we appreciate that IP and allow the best technologies and capabilities to be plugged in relatively seamlessly into the larger platforms that were traditionally very close hold. So we've had a lot of success with the primes, with contractors, small businesses, and academia at moving this model from large proprietary programs to platforms that are individually proprietary for your important, advances, but open in its interfaces so that we can plug and play capabilities in that are tailored to a mission or that bring certain capabilities of relevance. So I think the small business and academic family really plays a large role in the agility to bring those technologies in.
Well, I think too, with just small businesses in general, and then you take the universities, why we have the Saber Sitter program is for that reason. It advances these opportunities for, the small businesses and the universities to really work together. And the program itself, defines why we do what we do, right? We want to make sure that the small businesses have an opportunity, but we want to make sure the universities do as well. And I think that it's really important that we really do identify that,
I think you summed it up well with they're a big part of our future.
They are.
From a personnel point of view and a technology.
Yeah, one of the things I just thought of too, as we're talking through this, was the cross-disciplinary nature of folks involved in this type of work. Right, we heard it in Dr. Mayberry's talk, where I can't remember the exact number of majors that he quoted. I think it was on the order of 9 or so that are generally involved in things like trusted AI. So when you think about that, you think about our future workforce. Hiring across those teams, diversity of the teams, driving innovation is what we're all about. So it's not just, when you think of AI, maybe thinking of computer science, computer engineering, but it's broader than that. Bringing in, cognitive neuroscience, certainly things like math, but also philosophy that you talked about, ethics type things. So all that feeds into it. But I guess what I was thinking about, it all really feeds into developing a prosperous small business.
And sometimes when we think about AI, our mind goes to the most advanced, what Google is doing or some of the academics doing, which is all great stuff. But, I was having a discussion with some folks from the Space Force yesterday, and they're asking the question in respect to command and control, where does AI play? But it's kind of an interesting question. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg question. What comes first, the technology or the application space? And the answer is really, you kind of need both, because AI tends to be within a particular application domain. Which one should we look at? And the Space Force is asking the question, where are the ones where I'm willing to accept some amount of risk, and how much risk am I accepting? And then the other question is, and which has the biggest impact in terms of my manpower or, or maybe it's the latency of decision making. And when we talk in trust in AI, that it's a complex, at least 3-dimensional space involving the maturity of the technology, the how important it is to solve this problem, and the risk that I'm willing to take from a mission perspective. And so I can't remember where I was going with that. I'll come back to you. But in terms of I know where it's going with that. In terms of the opportunities for industry, small business, and academia, there's that whole spectrum from automation or deterministic algorithms. You want trust? Deterministic algorithms give us the most trust. Unfortunately, for a lot of application domain, they don't give us the highest performance. But in some cases, we don't need the highest performance. So there's a big opportunity at the low end of what we might call AI. In fact, those may be some of the biggest opportunities, all the way up to the high-end machine learning, where we don't really know where they go. It's interesting. Rand just did a study on the intersection of AI and command and control, and a framework for thinking about where that applies. And they looked at all sorts of different axes of AI, data efficiency, computational efficiency, optimality. But where their experts kind of focused, where they really are concerned, was, assurance, robustness.
Yep.
And it reflects the maturity of the technology, that right now, until we trust, we can't get to those other attributes. We'll get to those attributes someday. But in terms of the opportunity space for our partners, we can tune that dial based upon the approaches that we take to give, maybe more risk, less trust, less risk, more trust, and really expand into those other dimensions of optimality, data efficiency, and all that we ultimately want to get to. So it's a really rich space that I'm excited that we can go after.
I think that's a great opportunity to slightly shift to our last topic, which is really to explore the potential and the challenges with AI across the command and control and decision support space, specifically in the DoD, which has its own challenges with data, with labeling, with interpretation, and the risks associated with human-machine teaming and proper decision making.
Well, and what you see in the press are the success stories. First of all, you don't see the failures quite so much, but you see the successes in things like AlphaGo. Beating the world's best Go players in this game we thought we were 20 years out from solving, right?
My favorite one is the emergent cooperative behaviors in AI agents and hide and seek. So there's an excellent video, but just the behaviors and the way that the AI learns to actually beat the simulation and the structure is very exciting and fascinating if you haven't taken a look.
Well, but it's a good example of, most of these successes, and the StarCraft, of course, was another one that was big. Alpha Dogfight, DARPA, the DARPA ACE program, put out all exciting examples of AI doing things that, exceed human performance. But they all have a characteristic. They know what it means to win. And in human command and control, it's not that simple. It's not just kill all the bad guys on the field, right? It is to, maybe it's to de-escalate. Maybe it is to, achieve a strategic objective while maybe sacrificing others.
Simply to stall.
It's not clear. And the other thing they'll assume is, and we have a simulation model that's completely accurate. When I'm learning to play StarCraft, I learn to play it on StarCraft. I know that my model is exactly the target environment. In command and control, it's not.
No.
Right.
It's and especially to the extent that command and control really exists in the headspace. There's no good model of the headspace.
Yeah.
We had a discussion in the hallway yesterday, which was, how does an AI know when to quit? When I play a board game with you, at some point, we would almost never get to the very end of the game.
Yeah.
We get a little bit away, and I was, this is really not worth my time anymore. We as humans do that. We as nations do that. AIs don't do that.
So I'm curious, Mark, where do you think we are in building the infrastructure we need to move to that next step. We need access to data. We need a place to think about it, a place to reason over it. But we also need the modeling and simulations to test that our assumptions are even valid. So I know we've made a lot of progress in the last few years, especially in the DoD and moving down that space. But how far do we have to go? And have you seen a lot of advances recently?
In the modeling and simulation world, we do pretty well when we are talking Newtonian physics. So engagement models based upon things flying in air, we're pretty good at that. And if you look at the gaming industry, the physics engines are phenomenal, right? We could do that. As you move farther away from that, to things where you don't have the underlying physical models, it's more complex. You start to wonder if we really have a good model of our adversary, or we don't. So, but this is an opportunity space as well, to find better ways to do that, or find ways through things like active learning where we can kind of learn the preferences of experts, even if we don't fully understand or enunciate them explicitly. And these are technologies that we're investigating in parts of our program and are tremendous opportunity spaces. So
I have a question then. So you guys are kind of talking about like how AI never stops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you determine, and this may be off the cuff because I'm not real technical, but how do you determine senses, like as a human, and against, a machine per se? How do you create those senses? Is that like a code? Is that something that?
Well, it's first of all, it's a very deep question in the sense that, what we often do is we abstract away the sensors. I mean, so a model is responding to its environment,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly it's responding to the projection of the environment we give them. Here's a camera.
Right.
Okay. And so it might analyze the room in front of us here based upon a camera. But you have all this contextual information that's not in the camera. Maybe you're hearing things, maybe you see things. You know why we're in this room. The AIs don't have any of that.
Right.
And so, to what extent can we trust them to make appropriate decisions if they're only kind of looking at the world through a soda straw and not seeing the bigger picture? And how do you get them to see the big picture? How do you represent the big picture? These are the
accurately represented,
these are
right? Yeah.
tremendously hard problems, which you should read as real opportunities.
Right.
To do better.
And it's interesting to me because it's kind of, it's a new area, but I've done a lot of research trying to understand. And I think it's important, across the board that at some point these opportunities, that we as just, normal folk understand what it is that we need to do to really meet those.
Right. I find it incredibly exciting to think about how we're going to optimize our behaviors, across humankind, to make better use of our resources, our time, how we build and optimize systems. I think there's a really bright future in general, bringing AI to all these areas, and exciting to think about the possibilities. But I think the purpose of this whole event and the Trusted AI series is that we have to do our due diligence and do that right, unbiased, and that's scientifically and mechanically very difficult to do. But it's events like this that really make me excited.
Well, and
we're going to go down that track.
And then what's really exciting is that the machines are good at things that humans are not good at, and the machines are not good at things that the humans are good at. And in some of these closed worlds that I talked about, restricted just games where everyone knows the rules, the machines are certainly making inroads. But again, in the messy real world, that's not the case. But they're so good at certain things. They're so good at optimization.
And we're so poor.
And we're so poor at that. Right. And the rapid movement of information, again, something that they are excellent at and we're not very good at. And so, it's not so much to me, do I trust the AI? It's, do I trust the human AI system that has, humans doing what they do, AI is doing what they do, humans checking the AI is checking the humans.
Right.
Yep.
And what does that future look like? To me is the exciting question.
Lots of research opportunities there, right? Lots of opportunities space. Holy cow. Yeah.
So I think was very exciting. Oh, we have a few minutes left. So we can sort of wrap up this conversation. I think it's great to think about the role that government plays. And I think we're doing a better job than ever at teaming with small businesses, at teaming with ourselves across the joint force, right? And I think you can tell that the DoD is very serious about optimizing our processes, our capabilities through the use of AI, and we're very serious about doing it in a fair and trustworthy manner. So we have approximately 3 minutes left. Open the floor to any comments or anything outside of the scope of our three general topic areas.
Absolutely. I just want to say, I appreciate you both, coming and joining us.
Our pleasure.
Yeah,
This has
absolutely.
been an
Completely
absolute-
unscripted. For one thing.
Absolutely, completely unscripted.
Unscripted,
So
yeah.
I have to say that I'm very proud that, we've gotten this opportunity to actually, be able to do this and really somewhat understand what it is that we need to follow through with, collaborate
So
on.
I do want to say one thing added to that, though, is I think it's great to think that, yes, we're here talking about this, right? We have our roles in the duty, but there's an audience out here that are hearing these things and like, well, I can one up that, or I've already partially solved that problem, or here's an idea I can bring to the table. And hopefully it's events like this that allow that communication to take place. But I think we all admit and understand that the government is a complex business partner. So, I want to thank the audience for
and I would just add
participating.
to that. So events like this and the quantum events that we've held and other events, the Cyber Ops event, really look to, all right, how do we tackle this problem? Look at it more from a whole nation type approach.
Sure.
Right? So, bringing the DoD together, bringing together some other government organizations, right? And really kind of trying to do, and in these very hard, difficult problems we've just talked about, looking at what, maybe some of our adversaries out there are doing, it's their nature, right?
Absolutely.
So that's why I can't stress enough how important these types of events are and the focus that we're bringing to it here. So it's great that we're doing this. Yeah.
We unintentionally left the adversary perspective out of this commentary, not for any particular reason, but I think it's worthwhile to note that, we can't always rely on everybody to follow ethical practices and application of AI. So really leading the way, I think, will send an ethical and a legal message to the world that there are certain standards that must be upheld. And I'm just glad that the United States is playing such a strong role in that conversation.
And I'm glad to be a part of it as well. I mean, I think it's pretty cool.
Very cool. All right.